Here's a question I asked Fred, who was here earlier.
Yes.
He didn't know, I think it's Article 4, Section 18 of the California Constitution, states to remove a judge, the Assembly starts the process to impeach. The Senate holds a trial, and they remove him. If you're governor of California, and I'm beginning to think I really hope you will, because I'm very disappointed in Steve. Meg, I wouldn't let her on my studio if she paid me. There's no amount of money I would let Meg Whitman.
Good, because she's paying everybody else off.
But she can't pay me. I'm not viable.
So see, some people still have principle.
I do. I still have principle. And if you're governor, we have this David Yaffe sitting in Los Angeles, who was one of the 400 judges that took bribes from the county, and therefore the county lost no lawsuits for 2-3 years. And Richard Fine
is sitting in prison.
He's sitting not in prison, in
jail.
county jail for 14 months.
Yep.
Would you push the issue to get David Yaffe tried, removed?
Absolutely. That's corruption.
Would you give Richard Fine a complete pardon?
Absolutely. No questions asked. I mean, I can't even believe that I can't even believe that we have to ask these questions.
I'm going to vote for you.
Well,
Nightingale.
thank you.
Even though I'm a registered Ron Paul Republican, I'm going to vote for Gail Nightingale. Because I asked Steve Poisner on that field that you were on in Fresno. He sort of danced, well, send me information. I've got to think about it. Well, I sent him information, and they blew me off. Meg Whitman, forget it. There's Ken Miller.
And I like Ken Miller.
I like Ken Miller too, and he said he would give a pardon also. But when I asked that was at Ontario, and I approached him at Fresno and said, "Are you going to even mention Richard Fine, the decent, maybe the last honest attorney in California? He might be the last honest attorney. Are you?"
I like my attorney Daniel Lula.
And Ken Miller, the Republican running against Meg, and them. He said, well, I got my speech prepared, and I only got so much time, and I don't think I can mention him, and I haven't had time to really look at it. And I said, wait a minute, Mr. Miller, it's been weeks. It's been weeks since I asked you in Ontario. There you said you would give him a pardon. Now you got an audience of 1,000. Speak up for a man who's in jail, and he didn't do it. You had no problem. No. I'm going to vote for Nightingale.
Thank you.
I'm going to cross party lines. I can't vote for you in the primary, but in November, I'm going to vote for you.
Thank you.
Primary, I'll probably vote for Ken Miller.
I like Ken. I like him a lot.
And Naratelli didn't seem like such a bad sort either.
No, Larry's nice too. And then there's a Robert Newman is nice.
Haven't talked to Robert Newman, but what do you think of this gal?
I think she's pretty sharp.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I do. And she's got a lot of good ideas.
She would let Fine have a full pardon and put David Yaffe in jail if she could get the legislature. Would you like that?
I think she's right.
Are you going to vote for her maybe in November?
I'm thinking about it now.
Thank you. Thank you.
You got Uncle Sam sitting on
you.
your...
Hey, if I have an Uncle Sam's endorsement, what more do I need?
She's waiting for your endorsement.
I did get G. Edward Griffin's endorsement that day in Fresno.
Interesting.
Yeah, and that to me is amazing. I have Chuck Baldwin's endorsement.
I was stunned. I've met G. Edward Griffin before, and we're going to have
amazing man.
You got to keep watching this show because we're going to get G. Edward Griffin. He gave the best speech of all the speeches, and they even cut him short about 15 minutes. And his information about the communist collective and the collectivist mentality to take over America. They're 99% there, people.
Be irregular about the committee so they could get rid of it. She was not a friend of the committee, although she was employed there. So she went to the offices, and she took her dictograph machine, and they called it in those days. It was a belt, a mechanical belt, and she spoke into it, and page after page after page, she went through the minutes and recorded what was in there. What she found is this. At the very first meeting, and followed up thereafter, the first order of business of the Carnegie Endowment Fund for Peace was to how do we bring about a change in the attitudes of the American people to give up all of their cherished liberties and their concepts of justice, their affinity to their loyalty to their nation. How do we get them to do that? And meeting after meeting, the conversation went on, and it was a very scholarly discussion. And eventually they came to the conclusion that out of all of the methods that could be devised, there was nothing better than war. They said that in times of war, people of any nation will gladly give up anything. They'll give up their cherished principles in order just to survive, just to be protected against a dreaded enemy. They said we must use fear as the weapon against them. And so therefore they resolved to get the United States into war as quickly as possible and to keep it in war as long as possible. You must remember this was a time before the beginning of World War I, and they were beginning to think that it was a good idea to get the United States into that war for the purposes which I have just explained. And so we have the amazing thing that the International Foundation for Peace began to work on ways to get the United States into war. And this theme persisted throughout most of those early meetings in the early years, even to the point when it was possible to get the United States out of World War I. The Carnegie Endowment Fund, which by this time had great influence within the government, worked as hard as they could to reject a peace treaty and prolong the war as long as possible. Mr. Dodd explained that Catherine Casey almost lost her mind. She could not believe what she had discovered. It was such a shock to her that she could no longer perform her duties, and they had to reassign her to an entirely different office.
The Republic hangs by a thread. And most of you just feel something's uncomfortable here.
And if
they're
people
taking away my
have not read
rights.
his book, Creature from Jekyll Island, highly, highly recommend it.
Good. I got to vote. Not only am I going to vote for you, I'm going to call my friends and ask them to vote for you.
Thank you.
Because Whitman leaves me, and Steve Poisner lied to me, and when you lie to me, and then I found he was a CFR member, to me that's the end of it. I'm done.
Yes.
So then I'm down to the primary of either Ken or Lawrence Naratelli. What else would you do? Would you support a California coined, gold coined or silver coin?
I want a state bank. I want a sound money solution, and absolutely that would be a viable one.
Because we're the 8th largest economy.
We're the 8th largest economy.
We could tell the Feds
and,
to
we
go
have to
high.
remember, we have oil here.
Yeah.
We have, we could create fish hatcheries, get the fishing industry back up in the Northern California, relocate the sills to a different area. The timber industry, why are we importing when we have timber here? We can create jobs, as obviously the Central Valley is not even an issue. Just turn the water on, let's get the agriculture back. We also need the regulations that are chasing away production, chasing away business. They've got to go. We don't need to be the highest. Right now, 12.6% in rising unemployment in our state. And that doesn't even include the ones that are not even on the system anymore. What doesn't need is nonsense.
What about child protective?
You know, I'm glad you, oh gosh, I'm so glad you brought that up.
What would you do?
My friend Leo, his daughter, his granddaughters are in the hands of the father. Child Protective Services put the children there. This guy affiliated with gangs and cartels. Abusive. Yeah. They cannot, the grandparents, blood grandparents, been fighting, went to Child Protective Services, could not get the granddaughters. I had another grandmother.
Are they? At what point of violation of rights are they to take the Second Amendment rights, dust them off, and use them?
Absolutely. Seriously, these are children, innocent little children. And you know what? I had just before I went to Humboldt County, this amazing woman wrote to me out in Victorville.
Now, this is what I was disappointed.
And she has
so
the same
many candidates won't touch this.
Well,
so,
because of the couple in Georgia, was it Georgia that was I think were
Senator Nancy
murdered.
I'm not talking. I'm still investigating Senator Nancy
I'd
Schaefer.
like to know
For
what
those
happened.
of you who don't know, she was a state senator from Georgia. She stood up for the people whose children are being wrongfully taken and put with pedophiles, raped and murdered. She found out about it. She and I were going to get together this summer, and suddenly she's murdered.
Yeah.
No question that she was murdered. Even the police admit that. The only question is who really murdered her. And I'm
Oh,
not.
so they have changed it because originally they were saying her and her husband committed suicide, and of course
No,
they're
she
strong
didn't commit
Christians.
suicide. There's no question. She did not commit suicide. She
don't-
was shot in the back.
I agree.
And I'm going to get the crime scene photo. I'm waiting for them to finish their
Good.
thing, and my investigation is going to go forward. But I'm not going to say much about that. But here's my question for you. CPS worker, social worker, barely finished high school, comes to a young mother and dad and says, I'm taking your kids because I think you smoked marijuana last month, and you won't take a blood test. My question is, why don't you blood test every judge and every attorney when they walk in the courtroom?
Thank you.
Why
Elected
not,
officials.
why not test them and
All
every
right.
official when they show up for
Yes.
work? Random testing of
Yes.
every elected official.
Yes.
Why should the parents be held to a standard our judges are not held to? And you know what? He had a judge who turned himself in for doing cocaine in this
well, you know what? Good
city.
for him.
In this city.